also had a narration planned for today that I wrote like yesterday that just kind of rephrased my point about the way we're creating work as a social organism, either through boss and authority top down or through the individual decision making that is actually left to individual will. Because there was a really, really excellent arrival point along that thread in the term abandoned money. Abandoned money is essentially what happens. You get a billionaire epidemic, basically, if you're creating that work from the top down instead of from individuals' desires. You get abandoned money of many forms, one of which is the fact that Jeff Bezos is making $225,000 in 60 seconds. Like that's abandoned money. So is the $70 million that were spent on the campaigns of the opponents that lost to Mitch McConnell and that other lady people were trying to vote out. Like, the whole point was representative government and top-down employer wage, like money, are both the same failed mechanism. They're both the same failed top-down decision-making from subset, like individuals or individual pieces of a social organism, which fails. It doesn't get the truth. It doesn't get to the emergent wealth and emergent intelligence of the social organism. It fails it in such a way that all it does is elaborate deconstruction. So the term abandoned money, when I was first drafting about this, I was using some of the Watts influence and how he was talking about the fact that wealth is real consumable items which constitute something desirable or valuable. Like the sensation of it, the fact that it's really an experience, whereas money is just a number. I was using that to talk about how I was basically using the abandoned money math without having the term to say that so easily yet. And this is in the scripts for the essay narration. And I'll come up with some of the ways I described it originally in that particular piece. That piece is really cool on its own. I'm going to narrate it as is, just for get the full effect of the way I talk about it now. I'm just going to pull it up so I can just read this excerpt. Let me remember when I wrote this. Had to be a little bit before the quarantine. Poverty gain. Yep, here it is. I recently realized that there is, in fact, some more things to be said in the stead of Alan Watts, because he was wrong about something. If you listen to the end of Web of Life, I added this segment to the sum up in the second Zen Show volume. He's talking about what's left to do after we feed everyone and eliminate poverty completely with the automation machinery. What he's talking about is living for celebration, for joy, for meditation within all actions that aren't done in order to get something. So he was wrong. He spoke of the Great Depression and made an assumption that the path ahead was a sure progression to a social organism that only might fall because of basically nuclear suicide. He was wrong. That is not where we are. So that was the point of this piece. Edit note here. I'm interjecting this. He's wrong. That's not where we are. Resuming. He didn't see that cancer, bad rapidity, a wealth tumor paradigm would be the mortality threat impending. Title bullet. What happened to modern society because the great miracle of modern science turned cancerous? Question prompt. This is the prob right now. Humans need money. We have what can be thought of as the inverse of a moneyless society. It absolutely requires of us monetary input. It does not permit the existence of the outsiders to this. If there is a single way of defining the outsider it does not permit, it is the money transact. Bullet point or question prompt. You must play, or you must pay. The best way to upset the officials around here is to go along about your business rent-free, tax-free, and income-free. As an independent contractor, my finances are written to reflect that I operate at a loss. The revenue does not exceed the cost to operate. As an educator, you can see that my expense plus actions generate gains which are non-monetary. I convert the money into real wealth. In the act of teaching sovereignty in third place, with the core value being we, school, government, church, or anyone else, do not tell you who you are. You tell us that. I went into this much more in the call I placed to myself, actually. It was in that one that I expanded on that quite a bit. Resuming. Oddly, there's a whole array of partial systems if you float in that space of almost no income, the best of which is funding that you can only spend on feeding you/family dependents. SNAP, food stamps. It's a weird tool because almost the only way to benefit from it is to rig your finance numbers so they'll give it to you. The actual math situation is so far from what the system is asking for input, it's sort of funny to me. This system actually makes a recognition of the necessity to put funds into human wellness as a decentralized minimum transaction, such as the public school concept absolutely does not. Bullet point question prompt. No shirt, no shoes, no sovereignty. So let's study the big math about this. Alan Watts said the inner meaning of tech was to give your workers less work to do and let you go gaze at the moon and make love instead of wasting away in the office. Let me paint the predicament that goes on around here, because that meaning was placed in a box labeled, that meaning of tech was placed in a box labeled socialism, do not use. There is an insane level of debt, theoretical funds, which will never ever be payable or become funded. Those holding the debts will never collect, never convert to real wealths. Suspended thefts. At the same time, there is production which can never be purchased. Real goods which have only theoretical value, whilst outside the circulation of purchase. Unrented office, vehicle, home, unsold tradable commodities. This was where my original dismay came in. I saw just emptiness all around me. Just lots, full. Parking lots full of RVs, vehicles they could never ever sell or rent. Endless amounts of housing and space. And this is still what I see all around me. I took a picture of a sign across from the store where I like to buy this kombucha that says, put your business here. And like I'm always saying to that sign, my business is people's well-being. So that's a tangent. Let's go back into the narration. Expired food they can't sell because they made too much and didn't create monies to come back to themselves in exchange for the nutrition. An arcade you can't get tokens to play in. The profit accumulated by our so-called innovators are almost totally false gains when there's so much idle production. This is suspended wealth. This is a mathematical double bind in the heart attack of ultra-classism. Pretend funds which will never actualize. Idle wealth which will never convert back to the fund's value for any participants thereof. Effectively disconnecting the final value of the sum of owners/craft inventors and workers' effort into design and production. Suspend it within the theoretical and inverse to the non-actualized funds owed of debts, unpurchasable goods. Now it starts to become more clear that what's going on is ecological malfunction. Division by zero. Bullet point question prompt. I don't work for free. Yes, you do. Everyone does. Why? Because the agreed upon value of every given thing has been suspended within the theoretical realm and held up as net worth, as debt, and so forth. The GDP of the economy no longer has a meaning. It's an artificial, counterfeit floor model, with the real wealth being kept on an island like the gold originally was before being lost in the seismic event. That's from the Watts Cosmic Networks excerpt on the failure of the money technology specifically. Suspended in false gains and unpurchasable overstock, these are the tumors which have grown, an ever-increasing rot, where it should be the basic flow of what the cells and organs of the organism lives off of. What we need is juice, question bullet point. Therefore, what are we working for anymore? All activities have been value juiced. There's no fucking juice left. The only juice there is actually something else. It's what's missing from all this. What defines the does not have in false gains and the horrible plastic substitute for a wage, where the only thing missing is the made in China inscription, which is sharing. Sharing is the only juice left. The transaction of pure value transfer. It occurred to me that the solution Alan Watts cites from the likes of Theobald and Buckminster Fuller can be stated in a clear and profound sentence. We must stop funding work only from the labor production edge and instead fund it at the bottom where the purchase takes place, resulting in synergy, emergence, economics which are in fact democratic because no one is being coerced. So that's where that narration and final note ends. And where abandoned money comes in to pick this up and finish the thought is what I've been thinking about lately in the present moment. Abandoned money is that suspended thefts and suspended debts. And the whole idea here is that that's the inevitable end point of a system which has the decision making, the flow, happening through representative government and through employer wage, where the spending decisions are being made by someone other than the individual. It's failing. It doesn't work. It just causes the pileup, the cancer, the abandoned money. The only alternative to that is what I was talking about when I was doing the Diablo and WoW stream the other day, and the question of what are the wages of peace and what work are we creating. The only possible alternative is when you let individuals make their own decisions. You let the social organism run from an income floor, basically tokens for the arcade, which represent the real wealth, the real work that's going to happen when I go take those funds and I make the purchase, when I create the work, using the funds to say, this is what I value, this is what I need to happen, so let's make the purchase and make it happen. Exactly how all the decentralized or disruption industry gig platforms have done. The next step here, the only possible step, which constitutes innovation and progress and undoing of the cancer and the collapse, is this. So there's an interesting Reddit thread called anti-work, and I only say it's interesting because this is what the anti-work group is trying to say, that we have to. The other narration I referenced when I went off into this thread is a post I wrote on my project table of contents Reddit. It just goes under the same title as my other social media pages as this channel. And I'm going to read that one to finish up this segment. I'm just going to paraphrase it right now while I'm playing. It spells out the fact that representative governing has completely failed, and there's a reason it's failed, and that simple reason is that emergence, the emergent intelligence of the social organism, happens when everybody within it does what they're wanting to do, what it is that they're trying to do in order to actualize what they value. That's the social order is a circle basic premise, that what we value is what flows into ourselves, what is generating well-being and goodness in a way that flows in. What flows out is our waste. It's a very, very simple premise. So with individuals making the decision to actualize, to get the work done, to get the work going that brings them value, you necessitate basically the actualization of that value. You can never ever force that to happen or replicate it or imitate it through a boss authority, a king bully saying, this is what we need to have happen, this is the way we're going to succeed. My priority is what all of your priority is. By forcing people to do what they actually don't want to do and go towards some goal within which the stakeholder themselves is disregarded. So that boss is not the stakeholder in the emergent well-being of any individual in the social organism. And the organism's well-being is shared. We're all stakeholders in it in an absolutely equal way. In the way where they said all men are created equal, That's the way in which we are all shared stakeholders in the total emergent well-being. And in order to solve for this, in order to actually do a viable tech solution for this, the bosses who are obsessed with bossing people around, imposing their will on life, which is just a bunch of junk, they have to give up on that. They have to understand that it's futile to want to be a boss, to waste all your energy watching over everybody and policing them, basically, and trying to force them to do things a certain way and not allowing them to grow up and make their own decisions for themselves for what they are going to find beneficial. These two things, the goal of the social organism, well-being and emergence, for intelligence, for wealth, for productivity that actually works and doesn't pile up in these abandoned money and cancer paradigms, mutually arises with the abandonment of bossing, of the use of force. So that means that the final arrival point, the conclusion point in that, understanding that that has to be abandoned, is the same thing as saying, if we want to have an economy that just kills itself, that just strangles itself, well then go on having governing and representative employer-based money flow, where the only money motion that ever happens is done by large wealth holders who are just holding a huge amount of abandoned money that doesn't even mean anything at all. The concentration of power in small hands is the definition of not having liberty. It's the most dangerous thing, whether it's governments or other entities. I can't remember exactly where that quote's being pulled from, but it recently appeared in, I think actually in the end of the Milton Friedman video I have in my final page Minecraft compilation. I just finished highlighting it yesterday. That must be why it's fresh in my mind. But the mutual arising of a social organism where we have actually finally allowed people to grow up and make their own decision. The group of us making our own decisions, being paid to make the decision that we find to be valuable. The meaning of being paid to do that, to have that work created, is the abandonment of bossing, of wage-constricted money technology. It's the adoption of money as a technology for common sense, for the meaning of there's no bossing, you can't do bossing. To think you're doing bossing and actually accomplishing something is to just engage in the fool's task, that you're actually failing, you're actually not accomplishing anything if that's what you think. The arrival point there is to be a social organism that says to everyone, go do what it is you want to do. We want to pay you to do the thing that you think is valuable, because any other use of our resources is just shooting ourselves in the foot. It's just elaborate self-deconstruction. It's just a waste of my own time to try and police you or try and presume to tell you that I'm going to know how you are going to find benefit or peace or health at all. I'm not going to find that, ever, no matter what I do. Only you are going to find that, and you're going to have to tell me. And the way that you tell me is with your purchase behavior, and with the total emergent behavior of everybody in the organism. That is how the intelligence, the emergent wealth of the social organism comes forth and begins to circulate, by everybody pursuing their own decisions for what it is that they find valuable, with no boss interfering, without any infringement. The meaning of wu-wei, letting everything come forth as it happens of itself. It mutually arises in the meaning of the governance of society actually getting over the hang-up and understanding that they can't keep acting like it's possible to govern by ruling. It's not. It's impossible. You can't do it. It will never work. The solution is so incredibly simple. So those are our options. You have the option of a boss, top-down, representative governing, employee and wage system, where we will never, ever, ever get to something that's not just cancer, rotting of abandoned money, taking away everybody's sovereignty, worse and worse and worse. Or you can have the society which has taken money and implemented it as a system by which everyone goes and actualizes their own decision without infringement, under the meaning of wu-wei, to create the total emergence of society, creating work that it finds valuable together, to show our what we value to each other and bring forth what we can make to each other in the transaction of commerce. Merciful exchange. It's supposed to be merciful. The only way to do that at this point is to stop having bossing, stop having the top-down representative government, employer and wage system. It's been proven over and over and over that we can't do that, and that the intelligence of decentralization, disruption, gig, it just has to be applied now to the basic citizen in the form of money. They've been talking about this since the 60s, and it's so far overdue now. It is now the time that it's absolutely necessary is now at this point. That's what Andrew Yang is talking about. That's why my channel is political, because I am so exhausted by being under the pressure of bossing from so many different angles and institutions that all failed me. And under my harm reduction platform, we are all owed payment for the funds that the failed representative government ran off with and wasted for my education and now for my children's. We are all owed those funds to now go forth and actualize with our own decisions what we need to have happen in order to create the social organism that is true to our inmost heart and our inmost joy. And that's the only redemption path possible at this point, is to get rid of the bossing and the garbage nonsense hang up on bossing people around and putting them in jails and containers, and just let people grow up. And the way we do that now is to understand what the problem was, admit that the problem exists, and address it. Reconcile the wasted funds, the fact that I managed to acquire health and well-being, and the path to finding out what education is for myself, despite all the systems contradicting and trying to force me down these useless paths and these cancer paths, basically. Despite that, I still walked a path to find all of this for myself, because I was resistant, I was stubborn. I did it anyway. I did it my way, even though the system was saying, don't do that. I said, fuck you to that system, and I did it my way anyway, and this is where I'm at now. And I'm just trying to bring this knowledge into the social organism so that we can solve the disconnection illness that we're stuck in, the complexity problem element of the disconnection illness, so that we can actually start having commerce, merciful exchange, whereby our actions are a series of decisions of what we find to be best. To actually share that with each other. Not to do so is to continue walking in complete darkness, complete joylessness, and complexity, to the point of a continuing escalating violence and division situation that is just, frankly, it's going to get more and more violent and more crazy. We're already on the brink of a civil war here in my culture. We are literally on the precipice at this second of a full-out violent civil war. And it's because we have been pushed to the absolute maximum limit by lying thieves who are horrible bosses, bad managers, who are doing the absolute opposite of what good managers do, which is to pay their people and hands off, leave their good people to do what they do the way they do it, and not try to presume that they, as the boss, is the person who has the knowledge or the skill or the know-how of how to accomplish the thing that the person with the talent is supposedly being hired to do. Like, they've got the whole fucking paradigm upside down in that. And we're so upside down in this that we're in such an illusory division that it's both amusing and incredibly terrifying all at the same time. We've got the top bad boss, I call him the king bully, literally saying that the process of democracy is trying to be stolen by his opposition, when in reality the only thing that's happening is we're trying to fire him as the shittiest manager we've ever seen in all time. More people in this crazy pandemic quarantine situation have risen up to place their voice, to basically load some ammunition, symbolic ammunition, into our truth cannon to try and fucking knock down the 4 years overgrown wall of thieving lying that has been carried on by this horrible manager. And if we can accomplish that, it doesn't really mean anything other than us getting the satisfaction of giving this guy the middle finger and firing him, like the equivalent of quitting out of the bad manager, except done on a collective basis where all of us are successfully pulling that off against him. But it doesn't mean anything until we can walk forward and continue the humanity forward goal of actually getting rid of bossing and failed representative governing at the top level, and give ourselves a bottom floor level income system, which is a sensible, thoughtful, sane use of the money technology to literally create the economy that is resilient, that recovers from this situation, and that heals us from this intense and super duper cancerous disconnection division state that we're in. This is the only way it's going to happen. So that was the whole point of the Yang campaign, was to bring that message to the top. And I've gained a huge amount of connections with people who are trying to do exactly the same thing I'm trying to do, just bring the harm reduction message, to reduce the harm of coercion and bossing, to install a basic economic mechanism that we have the ability to do now because of electronic communication and Cash App, and the ability to basically transact without any physical token. That's as close to the moneyless society as you can get, is a tokenless society where we can electronically send every person $1,200 to $2,000 a month baseline and give them a little boost if there's children in the household that they're also educating in this. And then all we got to do from there is get rid of the oppressive authoritarian school situations and have spaces that are not for sale, that are for peace, for housing and for schools and workspaces, so that people can have the room, the real estate, so to speak, to practice their peace and to practice their craft, so we can have some commerce going on without all this rigging being done by landlords and the horrible managers of this world. Very, very simple. The answer is not difficult. Only difficult thing is how many horrible bosses there are just strangling the social organism and abandoning all the money, all the gains of our emergent productivity. It's just, that's the end of the punchline. That's all there is. That's the mic drop moment.